Welcome to church! Today, Pastor Doug is beginning our new series, Afterlife, where he'll be looking at the age-old question of what happens when we die. If you're new here, we'd love to connect. You can message us on Facebook, Instagram, or by simply texting HELLO to 587-323-1199 and we'll respond right back. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Death. A reality that we all have to face. $150,000 people die every single day. Where do they go? Are their souls somewhere else, or are they just gone? Is there life after death?
Good morning. Welcome to church. This is awesome. So great to see people here in person, and so great to have people joining us online from really all over the world this morning. And it was a really beautiful week. I hope you enjoyed it, because that's about the end of our summer here in Edmonton. But no, just kidding. There'll be some more times. So hopefully next week while I'm camping. But yes. So anyways, it's wonderful to have you here, especially if you've never been here before. If this is your first time, or maybe you haven't been here in a long time. Maybe this is the first time you've joined us online. We're so excited that we can have people here in person and that we can also have people watching us online as well. And in a little while, we're going to have communion together. So if you picked up your elements at the door when you came in, that's great. If you're watching this morning online, you've got a little bit of time to get some juice and crackers and bread together, and we're going to celebrate that together. So I'm Pastor Doug, and we're continuing our series called Afterlife, or Afterlife. But just a little humor to start off this rather serious topic this morning. So when I die and I go to heaven, I imagine it's going to look something like this. So Peter will meet me at the gate, and he'll usher me in, and he'll take me up to this beautiful building it's like a castle. It's all shiny and it's white, and we'll walk in the foyer, and I'll look around, and there'll be billions of clocks on the wall. And I'll look up, and each clock will have a name on it. And they'll also have a second hand that is ticking away. But something unusual I notice is that not all the second hands are moving at the same speed. And so I'm a little puzzled by that, because some are barely moving, some are moving faster. So I asked Peter, I say, hey, what's with the fact that the clocks aren't all moving at the same speed? And he says, well, the way the clocks work is that whenever somebody makes a mistake, they do something wrong, they sin, the second hand moves. It ticks. So I said, oh, I get it. That's why Pastor OJ's is just barely moving. I mean, maybe once a day or once a week, it just barely moves. But then I'm a little puzzled, because I can't see my name on the wall. I can't see my name by any clock. So I said, Peter, what's going on? Why is my name not up there? Why do I not have a clock? And he's like, oh, you do. It's in a very special place. It's right next to the throne of God. I'm like, wow, of course it is. I mean, wow, it's right next to God's throne. And then Peter says, yeah, he's using it for a fan. Yeah, so anyways, I try. So last week, Pastor Bev introduced our new series called Afterlife, and he talked about, is there evidence for life after death? And it was a great introduction to the topic. So if you missed it, make sure you go online and you get a chance to watch it, because it was really a good start to this topic. And while it's impossible to have absolute scientific proof of life after death, there are millions and millions of people worldwide who have had near-death experiences. And these people have been very credible, very intelligent. They've been doctors and scientists and professors and pilots, or they've even been children who had no preconceptions about it. And all of these people have even put their reputations on the line to come forward with their stories. But these experiences were such major turning points for them that they had dramatic impacts on their life. Let's watch Captain Dale Black's story.
For 40 years, he has been a commercial pilot, flew for many years for a major commercial airline. He's flown everything from 747s to Cessnas, everything in between. At age 19, he survived a plane crash that killed the other two men in the cockpit. But you hit right near the top, and then you free fell 75 feet. You hit it at 135 miles an hour. Now there's the plane down at the bottom, and the fact that you are sitting across from me right now is amazement.
They classified it as non-survivable. There was some bystanders that came by and saw all three pilots laying there motionless, and one was clearly dead. The other two appeared dead, and there was fuel and toxic fumes everywhere.
You were severely injured. They rushed you to the hospital. They didn't figure you were going to live.
I get into the emergency room. I'm literally away from my body, Jim, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I'm obviously not dead because I've never felt more alive. It's impossible to prove, but one thing I can say is I've never been the same. My life has always beat on a different drum, and it's because of this experience that we're talking about.
So here we see a near-death experience that was extremely impactful because Captain Dale Black had the curtain pulled back and he was able to get a preview of what life was like after death. And it was literally life-changing for him. He was outside of his body, which was dying, and yet he had never felt more alive. And the reasons these experiences are so impactful is because we don't like to talk about death. We just don't like it, often until it's too late, or we find ourselves at the funeral of a loved one, and all of a sudden death is unavoidable because it's directly in front of us. And then our hearts are broken at the loss of someone close and precious to us. They're gone. There's a huge hole in our hearts and void in our hearts and lives, and it causes us to think of the fragility and the temporal nature of our own lives. And COVID definitely accelerated this as it placed death and dying directly in front of us. 24/7, we would hear nonstop about increasing numbers of people getting sick and dying. And so we would do this and we would do that, and all of it would be so that we don't have to face death and we don't have to face the unknown. But what if death isn't the end? What if death is just the beginning? This morning we're going to look at afterlife. What happens to me? What happens to me? So why am I here? What is the meaning of life? What happens to me when I die? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Human beings have been asking these questions for literally thousands of years. And as Pastor Bev said last week, culture is obsessed with the afterlife. There's books, there's movies, there's TV shows, there's songs, all reflecting our curiosity, all reflecting our desperation to know what happens when we die. And one of the most touching stories and songs I remember about this subject was rock musician Eric Clapton's song, Tears in Heaven.
Would you know my name?
Okay, there we go.
Would you know my name? If I saw you in heaven.
Thank you for not making me sing the, the rest of that. So Eric Clapton had just surrendered his life to God. He had miraculously beat substance abuse and addiction, and he was becoming the father that he needed to be to his 4-year-old son. And he was going to take him to the zoo that day, and he was on his way to pick him up, and his son was so excited. He was running around the apartment, and finally he ran to press his face against the window to look down at the street where he may see his dad walking. But little did he know that the window cleaner had left the window open, and he tragically fell 53 stories to his death. The only thing that got Eric Clapton through that tragedy and prevented him from relapsing was his faith in God and the knowledge that he would see his son someday again in heaven. He wanted to see him in heaven right now, but he knew it wasn't time. So the lyrics went something like this: would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? Would you hold my hand if I saw you in heaven? Would you help me stand if I saw you in heaven? Beyond the door, there's peace, I'm sure, and I know there'll be no more tears in heaven. So death, and especially the death of a loved one, cause us to step back and reflect on what happens to us when we die. This Tuesday will be 3 months since my father passed away, and I know others have lost loved ones in the past year or so. And while I was able to say goodbye to my dad, I wasn't there at his bedside when he passed away. However, on 2 other separate occasions, I was present at the passing of a parent. The first time was 9 years ago when my mother passed away from cancer. Her body had deteriorated probably to 80 or 90 pounds, and we had sensed that death was near. And my wife Tina was quietly praying for her and talking to her. And even though my mom was not completely conscious, my wife sensed that she was saying she was ready to go. She said she was so tired from the exhausting journey, and she just wanted to go to heaven. So Tina whispered to her just to wait a little longer until the grandkids arrived to say their goodbyes. And sure enough, just minutes after they said goodbye to her, she was gone. And 4 years ago, we were at my father-in-law's bedside, and this strong, courageous Marine, this man had suffered a fall after open heart surgery, and he was now being kept alive only by machine. And as his family made the extremely difficult decision to take him off life support, I'll never forget his body trying to stay living and watching this strong man gasp his last few breaths as his body failed. But in all of these cases, although there was great sadness in the room at the loss of our loved ones, there was also a sense of overwhelming peace. Because although the temporary shell that had housed each one of them, although they had succumbed to death, was that the end of the story? No, it wasn't. Because who my father really was, who my mother really was, who my father-in-law really was, their spirits, their souls, their personalities, their emotions, they live on after their bodies have died. But how do we know for sure? How do we know for sure? So far, no one has been able to smuggle a cell phone or a camera through the security check leaving this earth, and there have been no whistleblowers with secretly released YouTube videos of what happens to them after they died. But millions and millions have reported near-death experiences, and it's very hard to ignore that evidence. But we also have the deathbed reactions of those who are getting a glimpse behind the curtain, even as their bodies are failing them. And they're on the edge of eternity. And I wanted to share some of those accounts with you. So the first American president, George Washington's last words were not, "Do I know your name?" but were, "Doctor, I am dying, but I'm not afraid to die." He folded his hands over his chest and he said, "It is well." Evangelist and preacher John Wesley's last words were, "The best of all is that God is with us. Farewell, farewell." English scientist Sir Michael Faraday was asked when he was near death, "What are your speculations now?" He answered, "I have no speculations. I rest upon Jesus Christ, who died and rose again from death." Charles Spurgeon, beloved preacher and author, on his deathbed proclaimed, "I can hear them coming." And he sat straight up in bed and asked, "Do you hear them? This is my coronation day. I can see the chariots. I'm ready to board." But for all of the wonderful accounts that give us glimpses into heaven, there are also terrifying ones that give us previews of hell. Atheist and author of The Age of Reason, Thomas Paine said, "Oh God, save me, for I am at the edge of hell alone." Gandhi, shortly before his death, said, "My days are numbered. I'm not likely to live much longer. For the first time in 50 years, I find myself in the slough of despond. All about me is darkness. I am praying for light." Skeptic Sir Walter Scott said, "Until this moment, I thought there was neither a God nor a hell. Now I know that there are both, and I am doomed to perdition by the just judgment of the Almighty." British atheist Sir Francis Newport said, "Oh, eternity, oh, eternity." And he uttered a groan of inexpressible horror as he cried out, "Oh, the insufferable pains of hell, forever, forever." And French author, philosopher, and staunch critic of Christianity, Voltaire's last words before dying were, "I am abandoned by God and man. I shall go to hell." He even offered to give half of his fortune to the doctor if he could give him just 6 more months to live. And I could go on because account after account, story after story of those who are skeptics or atheists experience terror or torment as they get their first glimpse of life beyond the veil of death. Many are screaming, and some have even tried to tear their hair out, or they're pointing in horror at something unseen that has come for them. And these were rich, seemingly highly successful individuals. Many of them were lords or knights, and yet Jesus' words ring so true when he said, "For what good is it for a man to gain the whole world at the price of his own soul? What could a man offer to buy back his soul once he had lost it?" Those, on the other hand, who were Christ followers are at peace, and they may even glimpse angels or Jesus reaching for them as they pass from life to death. Psalms 116 says, "Precious and of great consequence in the sight of the Lord is the death of his godly ones, so he watches over them." There's several beliefs of what happened to us when we die, and we're going to look at these using the authoritative manual for life and death, God's Word, as authored by the very creator of life and time and eternity himself. The first belief is that death is a dead end. Once we die, that's it. We cease to exist, and therefore we have nothing to worry about. But on the contrary, not only is death not a dead end, we will be held accountable for everything we did or did not do in this life. And to me, that is scary. 1 Thessalonians said, since Jesus died and broke loose from the grave, God will most certainly bring back to life those who died in Jesus. John 11, Jesus said, I am the one who raises the dead and gives them life. Anyone who puts his trust in me will live again, even if he dies. And 1 Corinthians says, we must all stand in front of Christ to be judged. We'll be judged for the good things and the bad things. Then each of us will receive what we are supposed to get. The second belief is we become ghosts or spirits or angels. The Bible's clear. We will have bodies when we are raised from the dead. Not broken, not deteriorating ones like we have now, but definitely bodies. 1 Corinthians says, it is the same way with the resurrection of the dead. Our earthly bodies are planted in the ground when we die, but they will be raised to live forever. After Jesus was raised from the dead, his disciples could touch his body. They could touch his hands. He could eat. He was obviously not a spirit or a ghost or an angel. The third belief is that we are reincarnated. I have news for you this morning. If you hope to come back as a mosquito or a famous person, I'm sorry to disappoint you. It's not true. Paul in the book of Hebrews tells us that just as Jesus died once for all of us, it is appointed for people to die only once, and after this comes the judgment. Belief number 4 is we become part of the universe. So if you had plans on becoming cosmic space dust, I want you to know there's something far more exciting in store for you when you die. A personal, loving God has an incredible plan for you, not only for this life, but even more so for you after you die. Belief number 5 is death is just a gateway. It's the beginning, not the end. It's so exciting and comforting to know that while death is the end for us on earth, it's really the beginning of the most incredible life. Can you imagine a life without sorrow, without heartbreak, without tragedy, without fear, without aches and pains, without losing more of this and without gaining more of that? Even the best life here on earth, the best marriage, the best family, the best job, the best health, even the best are full of brokenness. Heaven with Jesus will be a life that is so much richer and fuller than we could ever comprehend. This earth is such a poor, imperfect shadow of what is ahead. Philippians 1 says, Christ means everything to me in this life, and when I die, I'll have even more. So what happens to me after life? What happens to me? Number 1, we enter another realm or dimension of unspeakable and indescribable beauty. By far, the greatest challenge for those who've had near-death experiences is their inability to describe what heaven is like in their 5 senses, using their 5 senses. Just imagine if you lived in a flat, 2-dimensional world, okay? A world where everything is flat, and someone tried to describe to you the beauty of the beach and the ocean, and all you have is a flat picture. If you lived in 2 dimensions and only understood and experienced everything in 2 dimensions, you would look at this flat picture and you would say, well, it is a representation of something beautiful, but It really is only a shadow of the real thing in the three-dimensional world. You wouldn't see the huge variety of color, hues, and shades on the ocean, especially as the sun begins to set. You wouldn't feel the warmth of the sun on your face and the rough texture of the sand between your toes. You wouldn't feel the wet splash of the waves as they crashed into your legs. You wouldn't smell the smell of salt water, or you wouldn't hear the tide breaking onto the shore. And how could you possibly describe the beauty and the experience of all your senses in a three-dimensional world to someone who lived in a flat, two-dimensional world? Your words would fail you. So therefore, it's very similar to those who've experienced the 4 dimensions or more of heaven, and then try and describe the beauty found in millions of shades of color, or the light that is everywhere without a light source, or the overwhelming feeling of love and peace that permeates every cell of their body. It's virtually impossible to describe. Heaven will be like anything we could ever imagine. So what happens to me? What else happens to me after life? Number 2, my physical body gets an upgrade. Pastor Doug 2.0. So gone are the aches and pains, the deterioration. Like I said, too little of this and too much of that. Our youth and vitality will never run out. We go on adventures and explore and run and eat and drink and never get tired, never need a nap, never need to sleep, never need to go on a diet. 2 Corinthians says, we grow weary in our present bodies, and we long to put on our heavenly bodies like new clothing. For we will put on heavenly bodies. We will not be spirits without bodies. What else happens to me after life? Number 3, all death and sorrow and heartache and regrets and pain are gone. Revelation 21 says, and God himself shall be with them and will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more, and never again shall there be sorrow or crying or pain. For all those former things are past and gone. It's going to be amazing. What else happens to me after life? Number 4, we are reunited with our loved ones and our relationships restored. Not only are we reunited with our loved ones, but our relationships in heaven are perfect. Every family here on earth, even the most loving and caring ones, are broken to some extent. And we all carry emotional wounds and scars, and some much deeper than others. But God fixes and restores all relationships in heaven. I love my wife dearly, and we've been married actually 34 years today. Happy anniversary, honey. And yes, we got married when we were 12 years old. That's why we look so young. But let's face it, even the most loving marriage here on earth has hurts and wounds and tears, but none of us can imagine how wonderful a perfect, loving relationship could be. But you say, Jesus says we won't be married in heaven. Well, that's true, because marriage here on earth is just a shadow of the relationship between Christ and his bride, between Jesus and between us. Well, then how is that all sorted out? I have no idea, and it causes my head to tilt and hurt to think about it, but God knows, and it will be perfect. What about our pets? Well, animals were and have always been an incredible part of God's creation. And he's made each animal with its own special and unique personality that he takes great care and joy in. The Bible even gives us glimpses of animals in heaven, and I find it hard to believe that our loved and cherished pets wouldn't be there. The fifth thing, what happens to me after life? We have an eternity of exploration and adventure ahead. There are an estimated 100 to 200 billion galaxies in this incredible universe that God created, just waiting to be explored. I'm okay if you want to go sit on a cloud and play a harp, but there's so much more, and the Bible tells us that God created us to rule and reign over all of creation, including the heavenly realms. 1 Corinthians 6 tells us that we will rule over angels. Revelation 2 and Revelation 20 tell us that we will reign with Christ over the nations. 1 Corinthians 2 says, "No eye has seen, nor ear has heard, and no one's heart has imagined all the things that God has prepared for them who love him." We can't even begin to imagine the things that God has for us in store, both in this life and after life. And some of you may be here this morning, or some of you may be watching online, and you may have the confidence that you know what's going to happen to you when you die. But others of you might be saying, "My life is such a mess. How do I find heaven when I'm walking through hell?" Let's watch this short video.
In 1997, my wife and I met in a drug rehab. I tell people I was bad and she was bad, and together we became worse. When we got out of rehab, we went back to our mess. And as we went back, I have an overdose. The ambulance comes, they pick me up, and all I remember is that they're loading me up into the back of the ambulance. And I hear this voice that says, "Just give up. You know, you don't have anything to live for, just die." And as I give up, all of a sudden, I find myself that I'm no longer high, and I start racing down this black tunnel, an endless free falling. It felt like being cast out into outer space. That's when I realized I died. And so as I'm going down, the next thing that comes to my head is, oh my God, I died and I'm going to hell. I'm making all these justifications why I don't deserve hell. It seems like it starts going faster and faster. When I realize that there's nothing I can do to turn it around, I get to this place of desperation where I cry out to the Lord. And all of a sudden, the Spirit of the Lord comes down, and I feel the presence of God. There was a sense of peace that came down right beside me. It's almost like He interrupted the process of me going to hell. It's just me and God now having a conversation. And He says, "Paul, what have you done with the life that I've given to you?" And so as I'm thinking, what's the right answer? And it was right then and there, God and I began to look at my life. My life flashes in front of me, as big as the sky. And everything I had did in secret and open, good or bad, was flashing right before me. It was at that point that I realized that I didn't have any relationship with God. What a sinful man that I was. I said, "God, I don't even want to come back. As a matter of fact, if you want to send me to hell, it's okay. But I don't want anybody to come to this place. This place is not for people. If my life is to sacrifice so that nobody comes, then just let me come back and tell the world. That's all." It was then that when I made that decision and told God, just give me one more chance. Let me come back. Bam, I wake up and I'm in the hospital with the IVs. I said, from this point forward, I said, I'm going to serve Him.
So this morning, each and every one of us has that opportunity to secure what happens to us, to determine what happens to us when we die after life. But what if we're wrong? What if there is no God? What if there is no heaven? What if there is no hell? Well, I would say you're far safer believing that there is a God and that there is judgment and a heaven and a hell. And if it turns out that it's not true, then you've lost nothing. compared to the risk of believing and living like there is no God, no accounting for our lives, and it turns out there is, then where would we be? Earlier, I read the quotes of the atheists and the skeptics on their deathbeds as they realized the horrible choice they had made. And they're now getting a glimpse of hell and the terror that awaits them. And this morning, I want to give each person here, each person watching online, I want to give you that opportunity to make a choice this morning that you may have never made before. The most important choice you'll ever make in life, because it's an eternal choice. And I want everyone here and watching online to bow their heads, and I want you to pray along with me, and I want you to say these words. You can just quietly say them. It's between you and God, but I want everyone to say these words this morning. God, this morning I make the most important choice I've ever made in my life. I choose to believe you sent Jesus to die for me, for my sins and failures. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Come into my life. Give me a brand new start. Thank you for your gift of eternal life. Amen. Wow, what an incredible decision you may have made today. An eternal decision to have God on your side, to know what happens to you after life. And if you made that decision this morning, or you just have some questions, you can text life to the number you see on the screen, or you can comment in the social media chat this morning, or you can come and talk with us in person after the service. But thank you for making that choice. Thank you for making that decision.
Thanks for joining us. If you need anything, don't hesitate to contact us. You can find more information on our website or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We'll see you again soon.